Unicorn Nation, what's going on? Max Finn here, back with another episode of the Unicorn Perspective. Today I sat down with Yager and Meaghan Connell, and just absolute rock stars when it comes to data. The last few episodes, we've had some really smart data people on, which I love because I'm a huge data nerd as well, and we dove deep into everything from the future of cookie tracking with Google removing cookie tracking from Chrome in 2022, the future of AI and how that's going to play a role in data collection and using data effectively, some of the biggest flaws that business owners, online marketers have right now when it comes to setting up their own data collection processes, how they're monitoring, tracking, and actually leveraging data to make strategic business decisions. We also, at the end of it, dive into a topic that's very important to me, which is the relationship dynamic between the two of them. So being able to actually talk about like what it's like to work with your significant other. Very, very interesting topic to me, very interesting dynamic. And they had some really interesting answers, some really great things that they do to keep their relationship healthy, to keep the business healthy. And it's very useful for anybody out there that's in a relationship, even if you're not working with your spouse. A lot of great gems, super exciting interview. And I can't wait for you to listen to it. Enjoy. All right, so we're gonna dive right in here. And I told you there's no transition. We just go right in. So I definitely want to talk to you guys because I'm excited about the relationship stuff, and we'll get to that. My wife and I talk about this all the time of like, eventually we want to start a nonprofit and we're going to do some more stuff together. Because right now she's, running career service at a law school. So like we don't do business together, but I know so many people that are doing business together as a couple, and it's really interesting and fascinating to me. So I definitely want to dive into that at some point, but I really want to kick it off with something that I find like disturbing somewhat for online business owners. Like why do you think so many business owners are like ignorant of data, right? Because that's what you guys do. And by the way, I did this in the intro. Everyone's listening to already heard the intro, but you guys really are data masters. You dive deep into data, you create dashboards, and you figure out how can we use this data to improve our business and make more money. And it's so powerful, but it's also something that so few businesses, at least ones that we work with, and it could be different for you guys, have any idea. And we're talking, businesses doing $5-10 million a year. They have no clue. Hey, what's your LTV? What's your conversion rate? What's your churn rate? What's your retention rate? So I'm curious, just top it off. Like, what do you think that's about?
Yeah.
I have a very big judgment on this.
I love big judgments.
So, and I'm going to use our business as an example and my co-founder as an example. AJ is a serial entrepreneur, okay? And most e-commerce companies that we've dealt with, the founder or the co-founders are entrepreneurs. And in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to have some level of creativity and some level of, lack of risk aversion, right? So these entrepreneurs, and AJ is a prime example, are creative. They have these ideas and they're like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. Let's just go and do. And they're so passionate and believe in it, despite anything else, that they're ready to go and invest and build and do that, right? And stereotypically, entrepreneurs are more of the creative type, more of that right-brained type, right? They're more obsessed with how it looks, what the brand is like, and more of that creative piece rather than the analytics, just from their natural, draw to an entrepreneurial lifestyle. On the other hand, people like me who are number nerds and who absolutely get off on numbers and data, we are very risk averse. So we're not going to be the ones who go out and start a freaking business unless there's like research and reports and it's so laid out that 10 other people have already done it, right? Yep. And so I feel like it's a standard, kind of personality, not flaw, but just, data. It's just the entrepreneurial type is not going to be as data driven, right? And so what happens is they get into these niches, they get into these passion projects that end up having great messaging, great products, great audience fit, and they're accidentally successful just because it's good timing, good market, etc. And then they get to a wall. They get to a place where they're stagnating. They can't break that $3 million mark. They can't break that $12 million mark. Whatever it is, they don't know what got them here. They are flying by the seat of their pants. They're creating funnels left and right. They're creating new ad campaigns left and right. They're getting celebrities. They're getting, Instagram people, and they're
They've got
doing
a lot more to lose.
What do you
Right?
mean?
They're making more money. They're selling more products.
sure.
There's a lot more to lose. So they're like, "Whoa, wait, we need to get a hold of things here."
Yeah,
or they
and
bring in an operations person that then says,
we
"Oh,
need to
wait a
figure
minute
out.
here. There's a lot of waste going on."
So in the beginning, a lot of it is throwing the spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? And so the money's coming in. They're like, let's just keep doing what we've always been doing, which is everything, right? And then what happens is they don't understand what's working and what's not working. They've been just spread across. So by the time they get into the data, like a lot of times there's big aversion to it because AJ doesn't even like he likes taking action from information, but he doesn't like the ones and zeros. He doesn't like the spreadsheets. He'll glaze over after
12 minutes. 12 minutes and I'm like glazed over the spreadsheet.
like 12 seconds.
12 minutes. Give me 12.
We'll give you
I'm
that.
gonna add in my
12 seconds to a minute. We'll give you that.
12 seconds to a minute. Depends on how sexy those numbers are. But I also want to say that, most of us, entrepreneur or team leader or C-suite or whatever, we didn't go to class for math. We didn't go class for data and statistics. Statistics was kind of like, not really tied into that. So our upbringing, we really weren't trained unless you're somebody who wanted to be a calculus teacher and just naturally gets numbers. That's why most entrepreneurs don't get it, because you literally weren't trained to be a data scientist.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
That's totally fine.
That's totally fine. Just like other things, you need to delegate and find team members who are. But I think people understand and they see all the buzzwords and all the Instagram posts and all the things like, you got to be data driven, you got to do AI, you got to do this. And they're like, oh my God, I got to go do all this. But then they're scared.
It's overwhelming.
There's fear, there's overwhelm, and there's lots of lost money, energy, and time that goes into just not knowing how to create a game plan and do this successfully. So I think it's also the number of years. This has just blown up almost overnight. And people just don't have the training.
So why do we need data if we've been successful on our own, right?
Yeah.
But then
success is dangerous.
That's the conversation.
It's very dangerous.
Yes.
For sure, and it's addicting. But I think where a lot of people then start realizing the value of the data is when they get into those lulls or those consistent patterns where either the profit margin is going down, the revenue is stagnating, or the amount of wasted time, effort, energy, and emotions just gets to the point where they're so frustrated that then they're like, all right, now we have to figure this out. We have to figure out the why instead of just the what. Like, oh yeah, are we making money? Great. No, now it's how are we making money? Why are we making money? Why is it stagnating? And then when we get into the numbers, it's very easy to segment it out and be like, all right, here's the stuff that you've done. It's like Pareto's principle, right? Yep. 80% of the stuff that clients are doing typically is not yielding the returns. It's 20%. And with most of the companies that we've worked with, especially in e-commerce, less is more. It's those ones that have figured out their numbers, and it becomes literally printing money because they know if our acquisition cost is this and our cost to produce the product is Y, and then we mark it up X, we're good, right? And then it's literally just scaling, but it's less products or it's less advertising. It's really focusing on exactly what they found to be that sweet spot of money making, and then they just blow up. And those are those ones that we always hear about that like 10x their revenue instantly, and it's just because they actually took a step back and looked at what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You brought up a few good points. I think there's a reason why so few founders end up being CEOs of the companies once they hit certain, growth numbers, right? Like you look at Facebook and Tesla, like they're anomalies, right? Having Mark Zuckerberg found the company and continue to run the company as one of the biggest companies in the world, that's an anomaly. More times than not, the person who started the company ends up getting, kind of pushed out by the board at some point. Say, hey, listen, you were great getting us to 10 million, 50 million, but we need to bring in an operation person that's going to run the company. It's like, Tim Cook versus Steve Jobs. Tim Cook's an operations guy. Yep. And unfortunately, you lose some of the magic, but there's that give and take there. I think the other thing that you said, which is what I want to kind of really get to, is people get this analysis paralysis where there are so many things to do. And ironically, they're on the front end, they're doing everything, right? Facebook ads, Google ads and stuff. So they're good at doing that, like just because they want to drive sales and get any traction. But when it comes to actually tracking, attribution, data modeling, reporting, all those things which really help accelerate growth, it's like, where do I start, right? Like, okay, I have Google Analytics installed, but I haven't done anything with it. I have no idea what to do other than look at the numbers like they give me. And I have a Facebook Pixel installed and I can look at those numbers, but like I have no idea what to look for. I can't set up segments. I don't know what tools to use. I don't know what numbers to look at. So I'm curious, when you sit down with somebody and they're at that point, which I'd imagine most people coming to you to work with you are at that point, or maybe a little further ahead, like what are you telling people? Where are they getting started? What are the first things they should be doing to get a solid foundation and feel like they're going to make progress and get small wins?
That's a great question. It's really simplifying because, like you said, there's 1,000 things that we could build. The question is, what should we build, right? And so if you think about it like an org chart, right?
Yep.
Top down, there's typically less at the top, and then it springs out kind of like a tree. It's the same thing when it comes to data, right? There's going to be, at the top level of the company, the CEOs, those founders, they're going to want some core KPIs that are the snapshot into the health of the business, right? And sometimes that trumps all of the minutia of like attribution reporting, right? They're like, hey, we need these numbers first because we have to steer the ship. Right. And so a lot of times what we do is we start with metrics mapping. We go through and we say, all right, so out of all of these department heads or employees that need numbers in order to understand what's working and not working, let's go through and do a brain dump, right? Here's the 10 or here's the 100 for marketing. Here's the 20 for, sales for inventory, whatever it may be, right?
Yep.
And then we go through them and we say, okay, so what are the big organizational goals? Because everything that we build, we want it tied toward actually moving the needle. And we don't want to just build for paralysis by analysis, right? We don't just want to give people thousands of things to look at and then not take action from. The number one thing is somebody going to look at this? And if it's higher, they're going to do something different than if it's lower, right? Because we need to drive organizational behavioral change. So what we'll do is we'll look at the organization's goals and see what are those KPIs that are associated with that would either A, measure the success of our movement towards that goal, or B, are imperative for us to hit that goal, right? These are the things that make us move towards that goal. So what we'll do is we'll take those KPIs and kind of organize them based on the hierarchy of priority and the hierarchy of business value. How pivotal is this to the business? This one's super important. This one's more of a nice to know. Great. Screw the nice to knows. We're going to focus on the need to knows first because we really want to
move the needle
narrow
first.
that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we take into account is feasibility, right? Like you said, there's a lot of clients that we work with where they come to us and they've got their list already prioritized. Here's the top 20 things we need yesterday. We're like, great. Let's walk through these. If you were to go and look this up manually today, where would you find it? And what we find a lot of times is that the data doesn't exist. So this goes to a different problem because one thing that we do, so we've got a data team that specializes in automation, right? The pulling of the different sources, mashing up the GA with the Facebook, with the Shopify and Amazon, whatever it may be, right? We specialize in automating and visualizing that. But then there's also tracking. If you don't have data, how are we supposed to visualize the data, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So a lot of times attribution is a perfect example. People come in and they're like, I want multi-channel attribution now, or multi-touch attribution now. And then we go in and we're like, oh, so you've never used UTMs, you've never had the pixel set up, and you've never set any of this up to capture the multi-touch. You have multiple breakpoints in the customer's journey, so we can only give you last touch attribution. That's it,
Yep.
right? And that's the only thing that's going to be accurate until the tracking is in place. So to go back to your question on like the prioritization, it's a balancing act between the value it is to the organization and how feasible it is right now with the state of your tracking.
Mm-hmm. So then you've got goals at the top, and then we also help companies get very clear on the business questions they need to be asking. A lot of the times they're asking the wrong questions, or they're just like, I don't know what to ask, aside from the kind of big ones that they already think they should have. So finance or sales or whatever's coming into the bank account. So we help goals. Then what are those business questions going to help achieve that goal? Then the next level is going to be those KPIs that help answer those business questions. So we're tying those together on an executive level. Then you get down into more of the weeds. Okay, once we're clear on where we're headed in that time frame, we're going to get into specifically where does the data live? Is it all in one database? Is it on 21 different applications that we're using, and we need to use APIs? We need to use other ways to connect the data. Where does it live? And then once we know where it lives, we can then validate. And like the most important part to us is to take a few steps back. Instead of just connecting this stuff and putting it in a visual, is taking the time to make sure that the data is validated and it's accurate so that the companies can trust it. Because what good is a beautiful dashboard if you can't trust the numbers? So we go through and validate in a collaborative way to make sure that part's done. Then it just gets into visualization, filtering, the easy stuff. So like then it's digestible for the company. So we got these 7 steps of metrics mapping we go through that help us create a data roadmap over 1 year, 4 years, whatever that's going to be for the company, depending on where they are.
I love that. So I want to step forward like 2 years from now, 3 years from now. One of the things, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this with Google and Apple kind of started this with their privacy wars, right? And it frustrates the hell out of me because I think there's a lack of knowledge by most consumers of like what this tracking actually does, right? It's all focused on the negative. They're spying on me and they're stealing my data and they're selling my data, and that happens and that's terrible and that should be cracked down on. But what people forget is like, hey, when you look at like Lululemon and then you go on Facebook and you buy something, they give you a nice discount code. Like people all love that. Like a lot of that starts going away when businesses lose the ability to cookie and identify you and retarget you. And also your feed now starts showing irrelevant stuff. You start seeing, products totally not for your demographic. So I'm curious now.
AJ doesn't want to see tampons. I don't need to see like hunting goods.
Yeah, you're gonna start seeing ads for Hims, and he's gonna start seeing Tampax ads, or those menstrual cup, which there's a bunch of affiliate offers out there, Salt Cup that we marketed for a while. Like it's nobody wants to see that, right? It's irrelevant, and then it hurts the advertisers. They get positive, negative feedback. So Apple doing was one thing, Mozilla doing was one thing, and you've already heard from like Germany and countries where Firefox is more widely used. It's really having an impact. Google doing it in 2022 is going to be massive because Chrome is the dominant browser. So I'm curious, like, how are you, and this is so new, you might still be working on this, right? But like, how are you planning your clients' businesses for like when that happens in 2022, when you lose the ability to track somebody's journey across these multiple touch points? Because I don't have a solution yet. I'm curious what your just high level thoughts are on that and like what that looks like.
It's a great question, and it's like kind of the question that's on our plate right now as well. But what it does is speed up the time frame to be more data driven. So what we like to say is that every single business, modern business today, is a data company. You just don't realize it yet, or you may not realize it yet. So once you realize that and accept it, then now is the time to own your data. Now is the time to make sure that your tracking is in place 100%, and that you're not getting on platforms that with a switch of a button turn off and your data is gone. Meaning we need to extract this out of the APIs. We need to extract this out of the platforms that are there, given we have to work with Facebook and platforms that could shut things down. But as long as we're pulling that out and saving it historically, that's going to help us make future decisions. But it's got to be, people have to take the actions to be data-driven now, to own it wherever they're going to put it, so that when the tracking starts to get limited, they've got a lot more information than other people. This is going to be the competitive advantage. Now, it's not all going to go away, but man, there's going to be a lot of big changes in the next 2 years. And so we need to prepare our clients and everybody we're teaching and reaching out to, like through podcasts, to start saying this needs to be part of your budget, needs to be part of your conversation with your whole team. It's not going away. It's going to get harder and harder and harder. And those who have the information are going to be the ones that are going to win.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, we also say up to this point, it's been the wild, wild west of data. There was no sheriffs in town. We were all just capturing, and it was all great. And now all of a sudden, we've got GDPR, we've got CCPA, we've got all of these things, and then cookies being shut down. Like, we knew that regulation was going to come, right? The people who have been taking advantage of this up to this point by getting their own data warehouses and backing up their data and extracting it. Like even with Facebook, right? Back in the day, they used to give us all this demographic data, all these insights, and then freaking Cambridge Analytica ruined it for everybody. And then the API one day just turned off those columns. And we had all these dashboards built for clients where they had all this awesome, juicy, just invaluable information about their customer demographic. And then we had new clients that started the next day and we didn't have any of that, right? But the old clients, because they had all that background, at least they had a foundation, right? Now, like AJ said, it's not going to go away entirely. What's going to happen is there's going to be new products, new services that are developed that will, have a different way around this, right? Maybe there's a way that somebody can download a browser like plugin and they opt in for this kind of stuff, right? There's going to be different things that are developed to solve this problem for marketers, because it is going to have a huge, like the pendulum always swings, right?
Yep.
It's been super wild up to this point. Now they're super restricting it. And at some point, consumers will understand that this isn't all evil, even though there are some evil people out there. Data can be used for good and for their advantage. And I think that there will be a recorrecting of the the data landscape when that happens, and then when they start having these repercussions of seeing all this stuff on their newsfeed.
Well, here's my hypothesis for the future, and that is not hypothesis. It's just like as advice for people. No matter what, once you attract that person, it's not going to come over automatically from that person's IP and all that. But once you have that person's attention, this is just marketing 101, right? Develop the relationship, so it's going to have to be more authentic and better copy and all that. But then once you get them engaged, things like quiz funnels or the right message tool or whatever, asking little questions as you go through the journey to get that whole database and then put it in a CRM where you start crafting your own authentic database of truth, that's still going to be able to be doable. It's just going to be more strategic. It's going to be more detail oriented, and it's going to have to be a part of the customer journey as they come in from these advertising platforms. It just isn't going to be handed over.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I was actually just going to get into that, because that's what we're doing for like our political brand. Is we rely heavily on polls and quizzes. We've been using interactive content for a while now, and it's beautiful because you can get somebody to come into an ecosystem in a very kind of unassuming way. We're not selling anything. Here's a petition funnel, here's a poll funnel, here's a quiz funnel. And then over weeks and months, we can engage them with questions. And again, it's building a relationship, it's value. But then there's also ways to monetize that, right? So if you're thinking about, well, hey, that sounds great, but like I need to make money. Like there are a lot of companies out there who want to partner with, they want people that are interested in this issue or have this belief, right? And so if you're partnering with a gold company, there's a company over here that says, hey, we have gold IRAs. Well, maybe we run a poll that says, do you think Trump should return us to the gold standard? Which is one of the things we did. And this poll's sponsored by this company. And on the back end, they have an opt-in to get a gold IRA. Like there are so many ways to segment your audience and build a relationship and make money. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think people have this misconception that I have to pick and choose. Either I can make money, which means I just got to take cold traffic and sell them stuff, no relationship, no lead data, no audience development, or I can do top of funnel content, but then at the end of the day, I don't make any money. And there's 100% a way to bridge those two things. It just takes more work and more time and more testing, and knowing your numbers. That's the biggest thing. Is like you can only do those things if you truly have a grasp on what that lead, what that customer is worth to you over certain time frames. And that is like, without a doubt, the single greatest competitive advantage I think any online business owner or any business owner in general can have over somebody else is if you know what a customer is worth to you, if you know what a lead is worth to you, you can outspend and outbid everybody else. And it's like playing with cheat codes, and it just becomes unfair. And so I'm curious, like when you're working with clients, how many people are coming to you, even some of the bigger businesses, with like a really good grasp on those metrics?
2 to 5%.
2 to 5%. Yeah,
that's crazy.
It's very rare. It's very rare. And even when they do, they have very high level views of it, but it's not granular. So it's not as detailed as they want it. And hence that's why they're reaching out to us, is because it answers kind of a top line question, but then there's secondary and tertiary questions that stem from that they can't answer, but I think you hit the nail on the head, because even the other day we were just discussing building out for this client who, like, top of funnel is going to become more and more important, leading with value, right?
Yep.
They like we were chatting with a client, and they've got this warm up sequence basically that has a 65% open rate and a 25% click-through rate. And because they don't offer anything to buy for the first 3 months, it is literally just providing value after value after value after value. But then they have to know without a shadow of a doubt how many days between the day that the person becomes a lead to the day of their first purchase, and then how much are they worth over time, because then we know exactly what we can spend to acquire these customers, right? And then how long this cash flow needs to be managed for before we get that return on investment. And I think that's going to become even more important as these changes happen. But it's fascinating how many companies come to us, even doing over 100 million in annual revenue, and they do not have those insights. They do not track that because it's all been working up to this point. And for them, it's going to get even harder when these changes do happen, because all of a sudden, one day, things are just going to stop. We actually had that happen for one of our clients a couple of years ago, where they were spending $30,000 a day on ads. And then one day, the Facebook algorithm kind of changed, and they couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And they went down to spending $10,000 in a month. So what do you think that did that to their revenue? It's because they didn't understand what was working and why it was working. And they were just then a pawn to the market and a pawn to these technologies that control the data. And so back to AJ's point, it's so important right now to be capturing as much as you can. And that will give you at least a framework and a guiding truth as these transitions happen with these platforms and as the market really changes, right?
Yeah. And it's not just about knowing LTV, because I imagine that even the people, that 2 to 5% that come to you, like you said, they're taking, hey, here's our total revenue over the last year, and here's our total unique customers, and doing a basic, just basic division.
Yeah.
But LTV varies significantly by channel, right? So it's like you could be basing your decision to scale Facebook or Google or not scale these channels based on what your LTV says in the app you use, because there's a lot of them now in Shopify that just do it for you. But it's like, hey, no, your Facebook lifetime value is 2 times higher, or it's half. And that can dramatically change how you make buying decisions on the front end. And it's very frustrating, because every week I do live trainings with our students, and I get the same issues and the same questions week after week after week. And it's people coming to us and saying, hey, my ads aren't working. Why is this not working? Why is it not profitable? Why can't I scale? All this stuff. And I'm like, and then they show me their numbers. I'm like, hey, you're getting a 2x ROAS on cold traffic. You're getting a 1.8 ROAS on cold traffic. And they're like, yeah, but it's, it's not profitable enough, or it's break even, or whatever it is. I'm like, but do you have a good product? Like, is your product good? Do you actually have a brand that you believe in? Do you build good relationships? Do you have other products to sell, or continuity, or is it an edible that people need to continue reordering? And if the answer is yes, like, that should be great, right? If I'm making, and this is the way we treat all our businesses, if I'm making any money acquiring a customer, I'm pouring fuel on that fire, because I know we'll make money, and I know we're building an asset, right, that I could sell down the road. There's tons of ways to make money when you have a loyal audience. But people have this misconception, and I think a lot of it has to do with just kind of false or selective information put out there, where it's very skewed. Yeah, it's not it's not looking at like the whole picture. It's people that share a screenshot of their Facebook ad account, but it's showing like a retargeting campaign, but not telling people it's a retargeting campaign. They make it seem like this is my account-wide ROAS. And it's like, no, that's your, initiate checkout retargeting, which is the easiest money to make. That's post-purchase. And they're saying, hey, I get 8x return. It's like, well, yeah, but what's your account ROAS look like? And unfortunately, too many business owners are basing their decisions off of other people's businesses. And that's why I think it's so important what you guys do, because it's, you have to stop making strategic business decisions off of other people's businesses. It would be like, Tim Cook saying, you know what, I just saw Exxon, they just released their quarterly earnings, and these are the numbers they're doing. Like, we need to make some changes, right? Or even just Microsoft, right. Like saying, even like, because a lot of people are basing on different industries, but even just the same industry, totally different types of businesses, totally different customers, totally different visions, right? And those companies don't do that. It just, so why are we doing that? It just makes no sense to me, and it blows my mind whenever it happens.
I've got 2 points to make on this, because this is so accurate. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Number one, so that I don't forget, is going to be the averages. Mm-hmm. And then number two is going to be the benchmarking. Okay. So number one, averages. Averages are inherently evil.
Yep.
So think about it. Just as a business owner, think about it. If you have an average lifetime value of $100, what that is saying is that you could potentially have clients that are spending $200 with you and clients that are spending 10 cents with you. Yep. But your average is 100. So if you are flying your ship under this assumption of 100, right, then you are just mashing the good and the bad together. But as a scaling and growing company, do you want more of those 10-cent clients? Hell no. You want more of the $200 clients. So instead of having this average, which is provided in Shopify, which is provided in all of these other tools, right, that just smashes it all together, we want to cohort it out, which is a fancy word for just saying separate it out by the different aspects that impact it. You mentioned one that's key and clutch, source. Wherever the client comes from, we want to know what their LTV is based on that source. What about their first product that they purchased? We've got so many clients that have these flagship products that are like, let's say they're $100, and then they also have a $1 trial offer, right? It's like, well, don't you think they're going to have different LTVs if they came in and bought one thing versus the other? Of course. So that then impacts your ROAS, right? If I'm spending $10 to acquire a customer who's then turning around and buying a 10-cent offer, obviously that ratio doesn't work. But if I'm spending $10 to acquire a customer that has a $200 LTV or AOV on their first purchase, that's very different. And so not only are we separating out the lifetime value by these different variables that impact it, first product, source, their, what are some of the other ones we do?
Promo codes, coupon
codes, the medium, the source, the campaign, all of that stuff, affiliates, whatever it may be. And then we also do that for the individual ad campaigns. Like, don't look at your entire ad platform and just be like, oh, overall, we got a ROAS of 2% or of 2x. Yep. It's like, well, you could have campaigns in there that are at 76 times, right? That you've spent $55 on and it yielded $7,000. Like, these are the types of things that are those flags that we should be tracking. And then a lot of times what ends up happening is we go into these accounts in Facebook and the tracking is the worst. We'll go in and we'll pull every single ad out and literally put it in a table where it shows the spend, the revenue, the ROAS, the click-through rate, all of that. And we'll be surprised to find 50% of the ads don't even have a 0 for revenue. They are null. Yep. So there's no tracking set up at all. And we have clients that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these ad campaigns, and they don't even know if it's working or not because the tracking was never set up properly. Yeah. And so we show that to them to help them, number one, go and fix the tracking so that you can see if it's working or not. And then number two, you can go through and then eliminate these ads based on the ROAS and the lack of return, and then just double down that spend that you're saving now onto the ones that are crushing it, right? And little things like that. So talk about being data-driven. A lot of people come to us and say, oh, we're data-driven. Oh, we're data-driven.
Everyone's data-driven.
So what actions are you taking? Are you actually looking at a report and then changing your behavior because of the outcome of that report? If you're not, then you're not data-driven, right? Yeah. So that was point number one. Averages are inherently evil. Get granular, get specific, because that's how you'll scale. Number two was
benchmarking.
Freaking benchmarking.
So instead of comparison, it's benchmarking.
Well, comparison and benchmarking. So we had a client come to us who's actually a friend. We love him dearly. No names. Love him to death. And he goes, hey, so we're starting this online business. What should my what did he say? What is a typical customer acquisition cost? He's like, how much should I spend to acquire a customer? And I was like, that's a super loaded question. Yeah. What is your average order value? What's the price of your product? And I asked him all of these questions, and he wrote back, he's like, yeah, but like just in general, what's a good one? And I'm like, dude, I cannot tell you because it varies by industry, by your clientele, by all of this stuff. He's like, but what in general? I was like, I don't know, $10.
Yeah. Like, just random number. $10. There you go.
Yeah. But that's how a lot of people think. These entrepreneurs are just like, you know what? I heard that $10 is a good, it's a really, really good CAC. So we're just going to go with that as our goal.
Well, that's what like you said, is reading things, buzzing, and then comparing what other people, like you were saying earlier. trying to simplify it so much and compare it to other people, but it's not an accurate comparison. It's actually doing a detrimental disservice to your company.
Yeah, we work with like 100 different customers or companies, and we've got 10 different like coffee companies that we work with. None of them we view as competitors at all. Even though they're selling a similar product, they all have very specific niche target demographics. And that's where they found their kind of sweet spot. And even though they're selling a very similar product at a very similar price point, their ad spend is very different because of what about the back end products? Like, are they selling these conifers and these filters too?
Grinders,
are they selling the grinders, right? Every single one of them, even though they're e-commerce and in coffee, we can't even compare them. So it really, I think it's super detrimental. Now, what is very beneficial is ratios. If you want to benchmark against ratios, right? Hey, a very successful company has, 20% of their revenue that goes towards ad spend. Then 30% of it goes towards the marketing. 40% goes towards, delivering and actually producing the item. And then there's 10% profit or 40% profit, whatever it is. But those types of things are good, but you can't just. So sorry, rant over. I guess.
No, it's a great rant. And I'll add, I'll add even more to it. I think, kind of piggybacking what you were saying, people go with their gut too much. This is what's interesting about marketers as well that I've seen. And this is I think it's going to be one of the greatest things about AI and automation, although there are a lot of risks and negatives, and we can talk about that if we have time. But like, I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure everybody's guilty of this. You're running an ad or you're doing something and it's not working. Let's say you're running a new ad and it's like halfway through the day and it's like it hasn't gotten a sale yet or it's very unprofitable. You're like, hey, all it needs is like 1 or 2 more sales and it'll be on the right track. I'll give it another hour. And then the hour goes by and it's like, but it's just another hour. And by the end of the day, you should have turned something off and you've run it for the entire day and it's lost all this money. Whereas with like rules, automation, AI, like, you give it the data and the facts, which is all that should matter, and it completely removes your gut feeling, which almost always leads to losing money, and let the automation make all the decisions for you based on just facts. And it's really interesting, like, just how bad humans are at our like gut instinct and reading people, reading situations. There's like this great Malcolm Gladwell book, one of my favorite books I've read in 2019, called Talking to Strangers. And it's all about that. It's all about how bad humans are at communicating with other humans who they don't know. And one of the greatest examples was they reviewed a bunch of MIT scientists, created an AI program that basically competed against judges who set bail. So bail judges, essentially. And it looked at like 300,000 cases over decades. And it gave this program they created all the same data that the judges had. The only difference was that the program didn't have the face-to-face interaction the judges had. So the judges, the lawyers would make their case. They would look at the person in the face who was asking for bail, and they make a decision. So the program had the rap sheet. They had the facts about the cases. They had all the data about the local crime rates, everything. And the results were unbelievable. It was the program outperformed the judges by like a factor of like 50-60%. It was like the judges released like the 10% of the most dangerous people, and like 60% of them went out and committed a crime while on bail. It was just all this crazy stuff. Yeah. And just for like marketers and business owners, it's obviously not as dramatic for us. We're not making life and death decisions, but like we do really think that we know better, and we ignore data when it's convenient. And I do think it's something that's really important people understand. Like 9 times out of 10, you're not going to beat just data. You're not going to beat the machine. We like to think that we're smarter and we're better, but our emotions usually lead us to make irrational and improper decisions, which is something I think it's so important. And I think it's going to be so beneficial for our industry as AI becomes more mainstream and people start realizing like, hey, not only can this save me a ton of time, which is what's going to sell a lot of people, but like it's going to get a lot better results because it's going to make decisions based on here's our facts, here's our numbers, here's what our KPIs are. You run everything. Like go for it. Cyber9, whatever you want to do. Just you build it out. Just, remember that when you make a robot, when it goes and kills people, like I was on your side early on. So that's really fascinating to me. And the other one thing was like looking at data too granular and not in an aggregate. And what I mean by that is like a lot of people, when they make decisions on what ads to turn off, they'll look at, like, let's say they have 20 audiences running in a campaign and each audience is running the same ad. They'll look at like individual ads within those audiences instead of like the macro of like, hey, this video, how's this video performing across all the audiences campaigns are running it? And they're not looking at the aggregate return on ad spend. They're looking at individuals cases like, hey, here it got a 10x, here it got an 8x, here it got a 6x, but then, you know, maybe 90% of the other audiences, it just tanked. And so there's some really cool software that like we're using that is auto pulling out like all the individual copy across everything, all the creatives across everything, and showing like aggregate data on that video, that image, that piece of copy. You know, the short form videos you're using, the long form videos you're using, images you're using. And that's become super useful because now we can make much, much smarter decisions because we're not letting like individual isolated incidents, you know, move us down a path that's probably not the smartest path for us.
Yeah. On that note, super fun. We have a client who basically their entire business is 100% driven by Instagram. They've got an incredible Instagram account and it drives all of their traffic. And they're very, very creative. And they wanted to see this macro view as well. And so what they did is they actually took every single post from the last 4 years.
Wow.
and put them in, just exported it into a spreadsheet and added in these columns that said, what are those macro themes that apply to this post? What is the general color scheme? Was it shot indoors or outdoors? Was it done professionally or user generated? Was it shot from a top vantage point, side vantage point, or profile vantage point? Literally all of these like kind of esoteric variables that you can't really measure. You can measure, you can measure it binarily. And so they literally put this all in, and then we were able to see these awesome trends at this macro level that were surprising and directly contradicted internal intuition, and yet made perfect sense when you thought about it. One of the big things was they do big promotions for each holiday. And if you were to think about a post for Halloween, what colors do you think would be the best?
Orange and black.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's exactly what they've done every single year is orange and black. And what the data showed is that the likes, the shares, the comments were 7x higher on the posts that had purple and green.
Wow.
And it makes perfect sense once you have the data, you're like, well,
you know,
now that I'm thinking about it, it stands out.
Everybody else is black.
Everybody else is black and orange. So when they're scrolling through and they're like, oh, look, that's cool. Like, so, you know, things like that, looking at this macro trends and comparisons, like, oh, it's beautiful. You're speaking our language because you really do have to kind of take that 50,000 foot view to start seeing some of these correlations that when you're so deep into it, you can't see, right?
Yeah, and the technology's there now, which is what's great.
Yeah,
like that's what I think a lot of people don't understand is that like the tool we're using, for example, to manage a lot of our marketing on Facebook, that's a lot of really cool AI stuff. It has image recognition built into it. So it is giving us a report, basically AI tags, where it's looking at every ad we're running and pulling out, hey, does the best performers have a person in it, a group of people? Does it have a person wearing a tie in it? Like it's doing this automatically today, which is incredible. And I can only imagine a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, I mean, it's going to be game changing. So you need to start looking at this stuff and actually investing in it today before it's, you know, everyone's doing it.
Exactly, because that will be the competitive advantage while you're the only one still doing it.
And as long as there's an action tied to it.
Mm-hmm.
The analysis paralysis is great. Yeah, take the time to review the data, but if there's not a specific action or ROI tied to it, why go down that path?
Yeah,
just for fun? No. Especially like those are kind of things that you want to do after you've established the foundation of your data with the needle movers that are going to drive the business. Those are kind of the nicer to have that can be icing on the cake. So as long as it's tied to an actual deliverable and somebody on the team taking responsibility for it, that's the end goal here with all the stuff we're talking about.
Well, and it goes back to your initial point on intuition as well. This is super, super important because, you know, democratizing the data is super important because as an analyst, I may see these patterns, but if I don't go and share it with the actual photographer and the content creators, right, then nothing's going to change, and all of this insight was wasted. So that's one thing, is really making sure that as you're putting effort into these data initiatives, sharing it with everybody, because even though one division of the company might not be specifically responsible for the content, them understanding this gives them more data. So like you said, intuition is highly skewed because we have very narrow views, right? We only have our experience, and that's a limited amount of data that we're taking in, right? And data is synonymous with simply information. So going back to your very first question at the beginning, most entrepreneurs are scared of data because they see it as ones and zeros in math. It's really just information. If you're more informed, you're going to do better. So same thing with intuition. Our intuition is based on limited scope and limited data that is only based in our experience and what we've done so far. And when you have this contrarian data or new information that comes in, it's beautiful because we do shift, well, the non-stubborn, shift their views and take that into account, and then intuition can change over time. But also on the intuition note, the problem is, especially in marketing, we are in a very dynamic world right now. What worked 6 months ago in your Facebook strategy might not work at all today, because the consumers are more informed and they're more dynamic. And so a lot of times we'll come in and we'll analyze 3 years of data, but it does not help. Right? And so you have to constantly be able to adjust and look at these new patterns that are emerging and not dismiss them because you've never seen them before, right? Because it could create this whole new shift and evolution of kind of strategy that you never were exposed to before. And so your instant intuition would be like, shut it down. Doesn't work. Didn't work a year ago. Won't work now. But the data is telling you something different. So it's really important to marry intuition and this historical experience with the new data coming in and create a new shifted viewpoint.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, where you hit on it for a second. Like, success can be a very dangerous thing in that what worked for you in the past, people tend to double down on, right? It made me a lot of money then. It's going to make me a lot of money today and forever, right? And there are so many companies, big companies, Kodak, right, that like Blockbuster, hey, we're the king of the castle, like we've done this right forever. MySpace, right, like, and they just stop thinking about the future and trying new things and understanding like, hey, the reason we got to where we are is because we did something different in the beginning and we didn't rest on our laurels. And I think it's very true when you're talking about marketing and what you do with data. It's like, just because you had a great funnel a year ago or 6 months ago or a great ad strategy that made you a ton of money does not mean it's going to work today. The platforms evolve, the algorithms evolve, technology evolves, consumer behavior evolves, current events change, regulations change. Everything is constantly changing. So why would you expect you'd be able to stay stagnant and the world change around you and you get the same results? It makes absolutely no sense. And has led to a lot of colossal failures by big individuals and big companies over the years. And there are a lot of funny quotes online from like CEOs of these companies talking about, you know, like Blockbuster CEO talking about Reed Hastings and Netflix and all these companies. It's like, you had the opportunity to buy Netflix for like $20 to $50 million and you turned it down. I mean, it's pretty crazy in hindsight, looking back on that. So I know we only have a few more minutes because I know you do have a hard stop, and I appreciate that. I would be remiss if I didn't dive into the data stuff. I can talk about all day. I love talking about this stuff. It's so fun to me. But your dynamic is really interesting. You know, and I'll just speak from my experience, like, and as an analogy, and it might not be an accurate one, but like one of my biggest struggles has been, we have an office downtown. We have a team downtown. I go in for our meetings on Monday. I go in sometimes on Friday, but I like being home, right? I like my office here. And that's one of the reasons we're building a home too, so I can have more space and we can expand the office and studio. The challenge with that is there's no off switch, right? When I leave the office on Mondays, it's work's done, I'm coming home. Now, obviously I don't stop working, but it's like a change of destination. One of the things I'm curious about with your dynamic is, how do you transition between work and personal? Because it's similar to like location with relation with people. It's like you guys are together all day, you're working, you have a working dynamic, and then the clock stops. Is it just a a constant theme where you've woven it into your personal life, or do you actually like, hey, it's 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Like we're cutting it off and now we're focusing on us as, you know, a married couple and our personal lives?
Awesome question.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of ebbs and flows, like it's an
For sure.
organism, because it depends on how busy we are in the business, what's going on in our lives, holidays, things like that. So one of the best things we've learned to do is to, yes, have we're not talking about business time, a close down time. Sometimes it's our Sonos turning on music at a certain time that puts on the spa relaxation music to kind of stop our things. It's when the laptop shuts down. I think I work up here in like the third floor. Meaghan works down on the first floor, so we have a little bit of separation during the day. But there's a point where we also just don't talk about business.
Yeah.
Even if I have a great idea, I should go record it and save that for later, because I want to respect the time that I need to spend with her personally and give her love language, her love language of quality time and service.
That's my wife's. Yep.
I can't do that if I'm back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. My love language is
physical touch and words of affirmation.
So we read that book, and we also pulled our data into it and found out what really works for us, and we need to respect those boundaries from work, or else it's just going to consume us. Now, I will say sometimes if we're crazy busy, like December was gnarly for us. We didn't really have time off. We had to work a ton, and my parents were in town, and we had a lot of things going on, so it just comes in waves. But now we're like kind of back in control. We got back from skiing. We're getting back into our routines. And it's about that constant ebb and flow and making sure we communicate with each other.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, AJ's naturally better at this, right? So he'll have his little routines. He's more structured, and I'm very obsessive. Yeah. And so I'll get into stuff and I'm like, I can't shut down when there's still these freaking tasks. And I'm like, don't try and like get all personal with me, because I'm in business mode. But then the opposite is also true, where I'm like finally like completely decompress, completely away from it, and he'll bring up something business wise and I'm like, how dare you? And so he has a little bit more, I'd say, structure around it, and I'm more all over the place. But one thing that I found is I need crutches. I need specific things that will catapult me out of it. So one of those things is scheduling stuff on our calendar. Like we will schedule a dinner with friends to force us to shut the laptop and get the frick out of the house. And then we'll schedule trips. And when we're on trips, think about it this way, because our entire team works remote. We built this company to build a remote lifestyle, because when we're in Europe, outside of a castle, and it's 6 p.m., the last thing I want to do is work. So I'm hyper productive. I'm hyper focused during the time that I'm working. And then as soon as that alarm goes off, shut the door or shut the laptop, get out the door and go live. So a lot of times we use, I specifically use trips as like a therapy and a way to get more habitualized with that on off switch, because it's very easy to turn off work when you're in those places. And then same thing, like we'll plan concerts, we'll plan different things during the week so that we have a reason to get out. And every single time I am pissed. Every single time I'm like, there's still work to be done. There's still stuff on my plate. I don't want to go to dinner. I don't want to go to that game night. And then I get there and I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm human again.
I just have to physically drag
He literally has to like physically get me out of the work.
You know what also works is just hugging, just being quiet, smiling, hugging, bringing
20 seconds.
It's a
20 seconds to get the oxytocin.
Thing.
Yep. It's funny. Yeah. It's funny, Larissa and I are the exact same, but the opposite. So she has to schedule things and plan game nights with friends and stuff. And I feel the exact same. I'm like, I just want to stay home. I'm a home, but I don't want to go anywhere. But then like she forces me out, and then every time, like, I'm glad we did that. It was great. But it's an interesting dynamic. And I think it's super important to have that opposite person, because if you're both the same, then it becomes really, really dangerous, and it's slippery. But yeah, I'm glad. I know you have a minute, so I want to give you the opportunity to do that.
We can take a few more minutes.
Okay.
3 or 4 more minutes is good. 5 minutes, like we're good. What else? Cool. What else are you curious about?
No, I mean, I like it. Just always fascinates me when because being an entrepreneur is a very unique thing, especially like when I say entrepreneur, I mean like somebody that's been doing this for years, and actually it's like a career, not somebody that like dabbles in it, right? Because they're different beings altogether. But but it's a very challenging dynamic. And Larissa always jokes, she's like, I knew what I was getting into day one, but it's like sometimes she's like, it didn't see how big it was going to get and how crazy it was going to get. And it takes two really strong people that have, a lot of similarities, but also enough differences that you can get pulled out of those ruts when you're in them. And like we have opposite love languages as well. And I think it's so important, like anybody watching this that's, married, like that was one of the best things we did was like read the book, listen to it, and like talk about it and take the quiz and all that stuff. It does make a really big difference when you actually know, because if you're just going off your love language, like you assume, like for me, it's, gifts, like it's gifts and acts of service. And so like, I just assume that like, hey, I just got to get her gifts. Like I just get everyone gifts. Like it's good. But like, it's like her, she obviously loves gifts, but it's not like, it's not going to move the thing. She wants quality time and she wants physical touch. Like that's important. So knowing that, I can say, okay, I need to shut down. Like no gift I could get her is going to make up for working another night in the office until midnight. Like
right.
I need to spend time with her.
Well, and
yeah.
Can I tell a quick story about that, a data-driven one?
That one is, we're going to be telling that at the mastermind.
Okay, so maybe we can.
So we'll save that one. So people should come to the mastermind to hear our data-driven, how love can be data-driven.
Yeah,
that's a good one. We don't have enough time for that one. I love that one. Okay. It's fun to do it.
Yeah,
that's a good teaser. I like that.
But
it is.
It is. Yeah, it's really fun. But you're right. It's so important, and I really feel like it's collaboratively building a blueprint for a life and a business. And establishing those rules, or I don't really like to call it rules, but like understanding the values, making sure your values are lined up personally. So if yours is finance and hers is family, that needs to be reordered a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, right, to be in a true relationship, we have found that value alignment is so good.
And negotiation.
Your employees, your teams, your lover, like whatever. So values and those goals alignment, and just having those, Meaghan calls them awkward conversations, but they're really just necessary conversations to have with each other. Like, let's co-create this and let's install these goals in our mind and let's review these visions together and go at it together and track our progress and like have these meetings. So it's really setting up a framework for success, whether you're in a relationship or not in the business. But I think that's so crucial in getting crystal clear on how you're going to work the business. And then, because it's going to get busy no matter what. But as long as you've got your like kind of routines and stuff built into the calendar, because we have a shared calendar and a business calendar, and we put everything on the calendar so that we know when to switch.
Including physical touch, because that's not my natural love language. So I'll have to go twice a day and be like, oh, okay, yes.
I love that.
I'll give you your physical touch.
It's got to be better than that.
But like you've got to, if it's a priority, you have to make it a priority by putting it on your calendar and making it happen. So yeah.
Yeah, the calendar thing, it totally does. I started doing that. And it sounds silly, but for somebody that's like, if you're listening and you're not a systems person or organized person, like putting just the most basic things, like I put like wake up, read emails, like the most basic things, and just date night, all those things. We have the same thing. We have a business calendar and then a personal calendar, and we have access to both of them. It makes a huge difference. Started doing that maybe a year and a half ago, and it just it simplifies things. Awesome. Yeah. I think people
Some people will set up a time block, but then they won't honor the time block.
Yep.
So then you're out of integrity with yourself. So use your phone and set a freaking reminder or alarm that's annoying, that shocks you and gets you out of your state to change your state. So set the reminders, set the alarms until that's habitualized, and then that stuff will happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't do it because they think like it's embarrassing that like I really had to set a calendar invite, like reminder to go to date night. But it's like, well, the more embarrassing thing is not doing it, like never doing it because you don't remember to do it.
Or forgetting.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's way worse than having to set a calendar reminder for something that seems, basic for other people. So I just got to say, I'm super excited to have you guys in the mastermind. Larissa's going to be there, so I'm excited to have some dynamic there and have her meet you guys.
Double date night.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be great. And this was an awesome interview, and I definitely want to do it again. I was thinking what we probably could even do at the mastermind, because we have a few film crews coming, is like shoot like additional interviews where like we sit down in person and have a conversation. So I'm thinking of ways to do that, because I would love to take this conversation further and do it in person where it's a little more natural and seamless. So really excited about that. I do want to give you, I know you put together a little something, so I want to enter the plug zone and give you the opportunity to share whatever you want to share before we wrap it up.
Yeah, well, we've got an awesome book that we've written that's basically how to 10x your business with data, and it walks you through those very crucial KPIs and how to think about them and how to wrap your head around them. So you can get that at practicemetrics.com/unicorn. Just drop in your email address and it's going to get mailed to you. And then part of that, after that's done, is you're welcome to jump on a 60-minute free data strategy call with us, one of our data consultants, and like we walk through your tech stack, where you are with your revenues, what your goals are, and kind of go through that mini
KPIs,
metrics mapping, so that we can help you, like, hey, yeah, we can
Here's
work
what
with
needs
you,
to happen.
or here's what you should go do. And so there's a free call as well, in that same link. So we love to help people, and we're super excited about the mastermind and joining you guys, and we're down to talk about data anytime. So
for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. It was a pleasure. I'll see everyone next week on the next episode of